When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
Welcome to the second hour of the Elias Macko Show. There is a whole bunch to discuss with the minister responsible for the fight against racism here in Quebec. Also, got a couple of other dossiers as well, I should say, right? Minister for Laval, junior minister on the economy. Is that correct, that title? Yeah, that's right. Christopher Skeete is with us in studio this morning. Welcome to studio, by the way. This is the first time we've done that in a long time.
Very long time.
Pre-pandemic, right? So, Mr. Skeete, Christopher, Dawson Days, Christopher. Let's talk about Amir Elghawaby, okay? That's what we're going to start off with. You had some criticism earlier in the week, along with pretty much everyone in Quebec. First things first, has anything changed? You know, apology in that. Has anything changed? Your perspective, your government's perspective on her being named to the role?
You know, in Quebec, especially in politics and in general, it's very rare that we have such a wide consensus. And when you look at it, there's a big consensus in Quebec, kind of like the Canadians. You know, everybody loves the Canadians, that this is just the wrong pick. So I think everybody's on board with that now, and that's where we're at.
So I saw Yves-François Blanchette from the Bloc Québécois just say, okay, this is the wrong pick. But even the Post, the idea of the Post doesn't make sense. Now, you know, you're dealing with maybe the same kind of things that the federal government wants to deal with, but from the Quebec perspective in your role as the minister here for the fight against racism. What do you think about having that position, a special representative specifically for Islamophobia?
I think the idea, it's one of those things that sounds good when you think of it individually, but when you take a look at it from 30,000 feet, what you see then is, well, then why not have a minister, not have a person responsible for this group or that group or this group, and why this group and not that group? And I think if you get to that point, you'll get bogged down. I think what we want to do and what everybody agrees with is we need to fight racism. Now, you can have people who are racist and who have overt hatred towards Muslims. You can have people who have overt hatred towards Jews and black people. And I think when you look at it from the lens of let's just destroy racism, I think that's the hill to die on, not that one. So
let me just go after some other things, because we can talk about the Quebec stuff all day. There's one article, and I've said on the show, if it was one article that she co-wrote, and, you know, was based on some faulty data, I could give her a pass on one article, right? But there's been all the other comments, right? I'm going to puke when talking about Quebecers and the disadvantages of Francophone Canadians. The list then goes on. And I want to get your take on this stuff. Nobody's talking about it yet. I've been talking about it on this program here. She has railed against the monarchy, right? Calling the Queen racist. May she rest in peace, but she was racist, right? Canada Day is Judeo-Christian storytelling. She's promoted websites that push anti-Semitism. Over and over again, whenever she sees something that's anti-Israel, it gets a like on her Twitter. I mean, it's kind of incredible, right? Maybe she's just bookmarking it. Some people use it as bookmarks. She wants to look into it more. But usually when you like things, we know what that means, okay? She's also controversial within the Muslim community. She has told secular Muslims there could be no criticism of the religion. On the issue of Iranian Canadians who are fighting against what's happening in their home country, she's not taken their side. She's taken the side of the Ayatollahs here. So I want to ask you about all of this, all of the rest. Why isn't she's a bad pick on one thing. There's a lot to focus on, but she's still in the role. Will you now start to focus on maybe the other things to make the case that she shouldn't be in this position?
Well, you know, a lot of stuff is trickling out now that it's getting national attention. We knew from the beginning it was a bad pick. It's still a bad pick. I'm sure we'll discover more stuff because there's a lot out there. And I mean, you know, the apologies that came 5 days late, you know, are just not sufficient anymore. I think this person's role is to build bridges. We have to ask ourselves, is this the person who can build bridges? I don't think that's the case.
How is your government building bridges with Muslim Quebecers?
Well, I think it's important that we fight racism on all decks. And I think what we're doing is we're trying our best to make sure that we make everybody feel welcome in Quebec. So recently, we had the vice premier. She went to stand in solidarity with the Muslim community in Quebec City to celebrate the 6th anniversary of the awful, hateful murder of 6 men who were just trying to pray. So I think that's an indication of where we have to be as a people. We have to denounce hatred. We have to denounce racism when we see it. And at the same time, we have to recognize that there's a different call for people to be there's different types of racism that exist a little bit everywhere, and we have to fight all of it. So when we choose to look at a microcosm, Islamophobia or anti-Semitism or anti-Black or anti-Aboriginal, I think we have to just be careful because it never ends. Let's fight racism.
Okay, so with that in mind, so many people in this debate have said this. Bill 21 is racist. It's discriminatory. The law is Islamophobic, and this is why there are a whole bunch of people, right? If you look at the list of the 30 people that signed it, it's a who's who of anti-Bill 21 people. That idea still exists. Bill 21 is racism and discrimination. What do you say to those people who are making that case this week?
Well, what people who make that case, I see it as an opportunity to provide them with another point of view. Secularism is not racism. In fact, secularism leads us to fight racism because in the face of the law, where government authority is concerned, we're all equal. There is no preference. It's neutrality. So for me, the end of secularism is one of the tools that gets us to anti-racism. Now, the opposite for me, it becomes dangerous because we start to merge in people's beliefs and we focus on difference. I think when it comes to matters of the state's power of coercion over people, I think there can be no doubt that neutrality is optimal.
All right, I want you to listen to the Prime Minister from this week. I thought what you're about to hear, I thought it was quite humorous. It's almost like he stumbled into a defense of Bill 21. Other people would say it's otherwise. No, he's threading it's a fine line between the two. But have a listen to Prime Minister Trudeau this week, and I want your comments on again the continuing position from Ottawa on some of the legislation coming from your government.
I think one of the things that is really important to me is for people to understand that Quebecers come to, as a culture, to a place of defense of individual freedoms and rights and liberties, from a place of having, before the Quiet Revolution, suffered the yoke and the attacks on individual rights and freedoms of an oppressive church. And that comes with it a certain perspective around what secularism is and the role of religion in society that informs what modern Quebec is. Quebecers are not racists. Quebecers are among the people who are the strongest defenders of individual rights and freedoms, along with a lot of other Canadians.
So I want to just say that while you're listening to Justin Trudeau, you're shaking your head. Why are you shaking your head?
I had read the transcript of what he said, and hearing him, I feel pride. I feel pride. Le Québécois qu'il est sort de ce corps. And for me, it's that shows me that he gets it. So I would argue that
but does he get it? Because he says he's a guy. Bill 21 is discriminatory. Canadian government will fight in court against Bill 21.
There's a moment of lucidity, I believe, and I think if you take that excerpt, I think he's dead on. I think he's dead on, and that explains why Quebecers want, need, desire, and expect secularism.
Okay, there's been some debate about when your government is showing up to things, when they're not showing up to things. We're going to get into a little bit of that coming up next, as this is a pretty big month in the fight against racism. February is a big month for that. All right, we are continuing our discussion in studio with Christopher Skeete, representing Dawson alumni with me. Dawson represent, but he's also the minister responsible for the fight against racism. So, Christopher, listen, I want to talk a bit about Black History Month here and the fight against specifically anti-Black racism. Now, I need to point this out. I think there's some criticism to be leveled here at you and your government. There was a summit of young Black people in Quebec, and let me tell you, les jeunes noirs du Québec, right? And they were unhappy. nobody from the CIQ showed up. And I get that sometimes showing up to these things can just be like, you know what, it's virtue signaling when we show up. It's actually the work that matters. But sometimes you do need to show the face and show up. What happened there? Why didn't you guys show up to an event? And the people there, you know, we're saying this is kind of not acceptable that someone from the government didn't show up.
So I received an invitation and advised them that I wasn't available. We offered to send them a video to show our support. And we were told that there was no technology available for video. I wanted to participate virtually by Teams. They said, we can't set you up for that. We learned after the fact that Prime Minister Trudeau had a video and he was able to show it. But listen, these things happen. Obviously, you know, we're going to make ourselves available. I'm one person. I can't be everywhere all the time. But, you know, it's important that we be present. I don't see it as virtual signaling when you're there. I think it's important that we lead the way. But at the same time, you know, we can't be everywhere, and sometimes people are going to be disappointed.
Okay, so on you know, fighting racism specifically against Black Quebecers here, you know, we can go down story and, you know, maybe police profiling and that kind of thing. You know, now you're tasked with leading the charge against racism in this province, right? So it's Black History Month, and I think that's one of the reasons we're talking about it this morning here. What is your government doing that, you know, the concrete measures that sometimes go beyond slogans, the actual work here? Because I think what I hear a lot from the community is we want to see work.
Yeah. I hope you have a lot of time. There's a lot to report. One, there's going to be a bill that's going to be presented by my colleague François Bonnardel that's going to talk about how we're trying to put an end to racial profiling by police officers. So stay tuned for that. That's coming. We, as you know, in 2019 did a groupe d'action contre le racisme. We had 25 recommendations. One of them was actually creating a minister responsible for the fight against racism. People think the CAQ is a racist government. We're the government that created this role, minister for the fight against racism, so political accountability. We also, this premier is responsible for 50% of the nominations of Black people in the position of minister, which is also...
Okay, so so the CAQ government has named 50% of Quebec's ministers who are Black in our history.
In the history.
In the history of
and we've done that since 2018.
Okay, 50% sounds great. What are the numbers?
It's actually 6 in total, 3 by this premier. Okay. Minister Nadine Giraud was a competent, intelligent, beautiful Black woman who was the face of Quebec while she was responsible for international affairs for Quebec. So that's not nothing. And we also had, Lionel Carman, who's in charge of healthcare, for social services, and we have me now. So honestly, I think the charge is a little unfair sometimes that we're not doing a lot. When you look at government boards, we are now at 70% of government boards that have a visible minority since we added that requirement in our groupe d'action recommendations. We also started a societal ad campaign that
did not go over well in the first time.
Well, you know what? I was speaking with police officers, Elias, and you know what they told us? One of the reasons why a lot of these interventions happen the way that they do is they'll get a phone call, right? So imagine you're a police officer and you get the following phone call. Yeah. There's a group of gang de rue in this park, okay? So they're rushing to the scene thinking that there is a bunch of kids who are violent in a park. If you say there's a bunch of kids fooling around in a park, they're showing up at a different speed with different expectations. A lot of times, the community, when they call 911, just the way that it's dispatched will affect the way the intervention goes. So believe it or not, people do need to be educated on the fact that it's okay if a bunch of Black kids are in a park speaking loud.
I know you said you're going to be doing some work here on police profiling and some measures to fight against police profiling, but I do know that your government is continuing to make the case for random stops. I should point out, new police chief of the SPVM, Fadi Daguerre, also in favor of random stops. And so I know you're not alone in that. But what do you say to Quebecers? Say those things don't line up. You're for random stops, but you're telling me at the same time you're against profiling, and they don't see how those two things can happen at the same time.
Excellent question. You don't want to live in a world where police officers are not proactive. Number one. Number two, you have to differentiate between interceptions for the street code, which is basically le code de sécurité routière, which is for verifying drunken driving, which is 636, which is what we're contesting. and interpellation, which is a random stop. These are two different things. For instance, a lot of people in the black community and the community at large don't know that during an interpellation, you can refuse to identify yourself. You don't have to identify yourself. The police officer's asking you to identify yourself. You don't have to. For an interception routière, the police officer is verifying that you are within your rights to drive a car, because driving a car in Quebec is a right. Is not a right, is a privilege. So therefore, the police officer is making sure that you're legally allowed to drive. That's the difference between the two phenomenon. So what we're trying to say is we don't want to live in a world where police officers aren't checking for drunk drivers. And the only way to check for a drunk driver is to ask the person to roll down their window, stick your head in the car, and smell booze. So we don't want to remove that tool, but we do want to eradicate racial profiling. There's no tolerance for racial profiling.
Okay. I want to move this along here, and I want to talk about how Quebec maybe should be trying to put a name out there for itself, because I think in the rest of Canada, a lot of Canadians believe Quebec is the racist province, right? And I see it from the ROC, rest of Canada, all the time, right? They say somehow Quebecers are exceptionally racist if you look at Canada, okay? And I was wondering, just like the Canadian government can name someone as special representatives, do you think it's time for Quebec to go on the offensive in the rest of Canada, in the rest of North America, to tout its record? If you feel that, wait a minute, no, Quebec is actually the progressive province. Quebec is the place, that is welcoming, right? Do you need to do a better job at combating the narrative that Quebec is the racist province?
Over the past 50 years, while Quebec was talking to itself about whether or not we should leave Canada, we sort of were talking to ourselves and weren't really talking to Canada. And during that time, something strange happened to Canada. They started getting their cultural references from the United States. So in fact, when you look at the absence of Quebec in Canada, it actually led to the Americanization of Canada. So it's not us who's changed, it's them. And they're importing these notions of American individualism into a structure that wasn't built that way. We've always had the predominance of Parliament over the individual and judges in Canada. But now there's this importation of individualism and judges, and the judges should be the ones deciding. We've never had that culture, that legal culture in Quebec and in Canada, let alone in Quebec, where we have the civil code. Basic knowledge about what we are, where we come from, is being lost. And I think it's in part caused by the fact that Quebec was absent. Of course, now that we've put aside the sovereignty movement, we do have to retake our place in Canada. And we're doing that in a lot of ways. We're having productive discussions that are not based on, well, if we don't get this, we're leaving. We're trying to collaborate with our partners in the federal government. And I think, we win some and we lose some, but I think we do a really good job.
What do you, touching on that point where in the rest of Canada, they bring up American problems and try and make it our own, right? It happens in the U.S., but sometimes we have to repent and apologize for stuff that happens in the U.S. What do you think? I mean, listen, you're a black man. I mean, you're a Quebecer. What do you think about that when you see that importation? It happens in Quebec too right now. It's happening more and more. What do you think when you see an importation about terrible things that have happened in other countries that are now said, okay, let's apply this onto Quebec, onto the rest of Canada?
Well, I think it's unfair because in a lot of ways, it's not the right prescription. So, for instance, we have racial problems in Quebec like every other jurisdiction on earth does. But they're not the same, and they're not rooted in the same cultural, with the same cultural significance. Let me give you an example. Slavery has always existed in the world. The novelty of American slavery was to reduce humanity to an animal and to remove humanity from the person and to make slavery hereditary. Slavery used to be something that you had to pay off a debt, so it's always existed, but the novelty of American slavery was to reduce us to less than human. Now, not because Canada's more virtuous, just because by virtue of the weather. Our reality with slavery wasn't like that. Our slavery was more domestic slavery. Obviously, people are forced. And I'm not being an apologist, but even in northern U.S., this notion of slavery that was needed to whip people in the fields wasn't appropriate just because of the weather. So because of that, the history is different. The context is different. The treatment was different. Just the laws. we had slavery less long in Canada. We didn't have 400 years of slavery like the U.S. So 400 years is 16 generations, whereas in the Commonwealth, it was somewhere around 250. So just in virtue of time, the history was different. Let's look at the creation of a sheriff. In the U.S., the notion of a sheriff was created to track down slaves. You can talk about a systemic problem when the actual institution was created to track down black people. We never had that here. So yes, we have policing problems. Yes, we have profiling problems. Yes, we have racism. But to apply the prescription that is needed in the U.S. in Canada is basically the wrong medicine.
Is that why your government continues to say systemic racism? We're not going to tackle that. We're not going to acknowledge that. That term is verboten. We'll talk about racism. We won't talk about systemic racism. Is it because of what you just said?
There's the misapplied concept onto Canada and Quebec. That's part of the reason. The other one is because systemic racism is mostly an academic term where is it systemic or not? While we're fighting about whether or not it's systemic, we're forgetting the larger fight, which is let's just fight racism where everybody agrees. So instead of having a debate about semantics, is it in the system? Is the whole machine corrupt by its very creation? I think it's more useful to fight racism.
We have to leave it there. Christopher Skeete, Minister responsible for the fight against racism. Thanks so much for coming into studio. Good to see your face in person for the first time in a while.
Nice to be back.
All right, take care.